remember the first time you saw those tail fins gleaming under a streetlight? The 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air was chrome, confidence, and pure jet-age dreaming rolled into one. Today, we're exploring 25 weird facts about this American legend that even the folks who drove one off the lot never heard. Let's start with the strangest fact of all, that 57 Bel Air, the car half of America now calls the most beautiful Chevy ever built, was never actually supposed to exist. General Motors had drawn up an all-new car for 1957, a clean-sheet design meant to leap ahead of Ford and Plymouth. But the tooling ran behind schedule, the money ran short, and somebody upstairs made a hard call. The brand-new car would have to wait until 1958. For 1957, Chevrolet would have to make do with the same basic body shell it had been selling since 1955. Chief Engineer Ed Cole refused to let it look like a leftover. He ordered a whole cascade of changes, a new dashboard, a sealed cowl, reshaped headlight pods, and those famous fins. What was supposed to be a stopgap, a car built to buy time, turned into the single most beloved shape of the entire decade. That's right, the most iconic Chevy of all time was an accident. 1 horsepower per cubic inch. Here's a number that meant everything to a young man in 1957. 283. That was the size of the new small block V8 in cubic inches, and with the right setup, it was also exactly how many horsepower it made. 283 cubic inches, 283 horsepower. 1 horsepower for every cubic inch. In the 1950s, that was a magic threshold, an engineering brass ring nobody in a General Motors showroom had ever reached before. Chevrolet plastered it across every ad they could buy. Now, the honest truth, Chrysler had quietly beaten them to it a year earlier with a hopped-up 300B, but nobody remembers that. Chevy told the story louder and told it better, and to this day, when old-timers talk about the 57, that magic 1-to-1 number is the first thing out of their mouths. Imagine that, a working man's Chevrolet punching straight into the record books. The fuel injection almost nobody bought. The way you got to that magic 283 horsepower was a marvel called Rochester Ramjet fuel injection. No carburetor at all, fuel sprayed straight toward each cylinder through a spidery cluster of steel lines, technology so advanced it felt like science fiction sitting under a Chevy hood. And here's the weird part, almost nobody bought it. The option cost around $500, which was staggering money in 1957. Enough to push a loaded Bel Air right up into Cadillac territory. Worse, the system was fussy. It hated cold mornings, and precious few corner mechanics knew how to keep it running. So most buyers took one look at the price tag and checked the box for a good old 4-barrel carburetor instead. Out of hundreds of thousands of Bel Airs built that year, only around 1,500 left the factory with fuel injection. The single most famous feature of the 57 Chevy was one that hardly anyone actually ordered. The gas cap hiding in the fin. Go find a 57 Bel Air at a car show and try to spot the gas cap. Go on, you'll walk around it twice and still miss it. The designers tucked the fuel filler cleverly behind the chrome trim spear at the back edge of the left tail fin. You flip open the hinged chrome molding, and there it is. It was a small thing, but it tells you everything about how these cars were designed. Nothing was allowed to interrupt those clean flowing lines, not even something as ordinary as where you put the gas in. In an age when most cars wore their fuel caps right out in the open, Chevy hid theirs like a secret. Back in the day, more than one gas station attendant stood there scratching his head, and more than one new owner had to go back inside the dealership to ask where on earth the tank filled up. The poor man's Cadillac. Chevrolet had a nickname for the top trim Bel Air, and so did everyone else. They called it the poor man's Cadillac, and they meant it as high praise. What set the Bel Air apart from its cheaper 210 and 150 cousins was gold. Real anodized gold trim. The grille got a gold-tinted insert. The big V under the hood emblem was gold on a Bel Air, plain chrome on the lesser models. The little chevron badges on the front fenders, gold. The script on the trunk, gold. It was Chevrolet's way of letting a school teacher or a factory foreman roll down Main Street feeling every bit as grand as the banker in his Cadillac, for a fraction of the price. And it worked. That gold trim turned an ordinary family sedan into an object of genuine envy. Those fins were brand new. We think of the 57 fins as timeless now, but in 1957 they were shockingly new. The 1955 and 1956 Chevys had rounded, almost bashful rear ends. For 57, Ed Cole's team stretched and squared those rear fenders into broad, flat tail fins meant to echo the jet fighters and rockets that filled the newspapers. The whole country was mad for aviation and the coming space age, and Detroit gave the people exactly what they craved. The fins didn't do a single thing for how the car drove. They were pure style, pure attitude, pure 1950s optimism pressed into sheet metal. And the gamble paid off in a way nobody could have predicted, because those fins became the defining silhouette of an entire era, the car that shrank its wheels. Here's one that stumps even longtime Chevy people. To make the 57 look lower and more planted than the year before, the designers didn't lower the body much at all. They shrank the wheels. The 1955 and 1956 cars rode on 15-inch wheels. For 1957, Chevrolet dropped down to 14-inch wheels. That 1 inch multiplied around the whole car, dropped the Bel Air closer to the pavement, and gave it that wide, hunkered-down stance we all picture. It's a designer's trick, sleight of hand, really, and it fooled everybody. People swore the new car sat lower and looked meaner, and they were right, but not for the reason they thought. The icon that lost the sales war. Now here's a fact that'll surprise you. For all its fame, the 57 Chevy did not win 1957. Ford did. The all-new 57 Ford, longer and lower and fresher looking, outsold Chevrolet that model year, and depending on exactly how you count the numbers, it wasn't even especially close. It was the first time in ages Chevrolet had been beaten. Let that sink in. The car we now crown as the king of the 50s actually came in second the year it was born. It was only later, much later, that the 57 Chevy pulled ahead in the one race that mattered, the race for America's heart. Did your family drive a Ford or a Chevy back then? Tell us in the comments, and tell us what part of the country you grew up in. We love hearing which side of that old rivalry your household landed on. The rarest Bel Air of them all. Everybody remembers the convertible and the hardtop coupe, but the rarest and most coveted 57 Bel Air is a station wagon, the Nomad. It was a sleek two-door wagon with a slanted rear pillar, ribbed roof, and wraparound tailgate glass born from a dream car Harley Earl showed at the 1954 Motorama, a wagon built on Corvette styling. Chevrolet called it the beauty queen of station wagons. Trouble was, it cost more than a four-door wagon and hauled less, so families passed it by. Only a little over 6,000 Nomads were built for 1957, making it by far the scarcest body style of the whole run. What the public snubbed in 1957, collectors now chase across the country, and a fine Nomad today can bring six figures. The bomb sight on the hood. Run your eyes down the flat hood of a 57 and you'll spot two little chrome ornaments riding on raised bulges, Chevrolet called wind splits. Those ornaments have a name that tells you exactly what the 50s were dreaming about, bomb sights. That's what the factory and the fans called them, little chrome cones perched up front like the aiming device on a bomber aircraft. Everything about this car reached for the sky, the jet fighter fins in back, the bomb sights up front, the whole thing pointing toward a future of rockets and supersonic flight. It's a strange thing to put on a family grocery getter when you think about it, but in 1957, nobody thought it strange at all. They thought it was the future, and they wanted a piece of it in their own driveway. The bullets on the bumper. While your eye is up front, look at the bumper. Those two big chrome cones jutting out below the grille are the bullet bumper guards, sometimes called bombs. They were half decoration and half protection, and they gave the front end an unmistakable face. Combine the bullet guards, the wide oval grille, the hooded headlights, and that gold Bel Air trim, and you had a front end that people recognized from a block away. Kids could name a 57 Chevy coming down the street before they could see the driver. That instant recognition is a huge part of why the car became a legend. It simply looked like nothing else on the road then or now. The engine that never died. That 283 small block V8 wasn't just powerful. It turned out to be one of the most important engines America ever built. The basic Chevy small block, which first appeared in 1955 and grew into the 283 for 57, stayed in production in one form or another for the better part of 50 years. Over 90 million of them were built. 90 million. It powered everything from grocery store Chevys to race cars to boats to hot rods, and mechanics loved it because it was simple, tough, and easy to fix. Hard to believe, right? The little V8 that debuted in your neighbor's Bel Air became the beating heart of American motoring for generations. When people talk about the engine that put the country on wheels, this is the one they mean. The Black Widow that got banned. Underneath all that chrome, the '57 Chevy was a stone-cold racing machine. Chevrolet built a stripped-down, fuel-injected version, often a plain 150 sedan, that racers nicknamed the Black Widow. With that 283 sitting low and set back behind the front wheels, the car handled and accelerated so well it began winning nearly everything in sight on the NASCAR short tracks in early 1957. It was so dominant that it was quickly outlawed from top-level competition. Think about that. Chevrolet built a car so good at racing that the sport had to ban it to give everybody else a chance. That's not a knock on the car. That's the highest compliment a race car can ever receive. If these are bringing the memories flooding back, you are exactly who we make these for. Do us one small favor and subscribe so the next trip down memory lane finds you. That is all we ask. Now back to it, the cubic inch handcuffs. The banning didn't stop there. The 55 through 57 Chevys, and especially the mighty 57, kept winning at so many tracks that racing officials slapped cubic inch restrictions on them, essentially handicapping the cars to keep the competition fair. And even held back, those Tri-5 Chevys kept right on winning in the lower divisions clear into the 1970s, until officials finally aged them out of competition altogether. Nearly 20 years after it was built, the 57 was still the car to beat at dirt tracks and short tracks all across the country. Few cars in history have ever stayed competitive that long. It just refused to quit. The Demolition Derby champion. Now for a strange twist. The very same 57 Chevy that dominated the racetrack also dominated a very different arena, the Demolition Derby. It turned out the car was surprisingly hard to kill. The radiator sat set back from the grille, tucked in behind sturdy structure, so all those front-end collisions that knocked other cars out of commission just bounced off the Chevy. Drivers figured this out fast, and for years the 57 was a prized derby car precisely because it could take a beating and keep running. There's a certain irony there. The car we treasure today for its beauty was, for a good long while, the most feared wrecking machine at every county fairground in America. 7 different V8s. Walk into a Chevrolet showroom in 1957 and the engine menu would make your head spin. There were 7 different V8 setups available across the lineup, 5 of them versions of the new 283 alone. You could get a mild 2-barrel making 185 horsepower, a 4-barrel at 220, a dual 4-barrel at 245, another dual-carb version with a wild racing camshaft making 270, and of course the fuel-injected screamer at the full 283. Never before had an ordinary buyer been handed so many choices under one hood. A young hot rodder and his grandfather could walk out with the exact same Bel Air body wearing wildly different personalities underneath. That flexibility, that build-it-your-way spirit was brand new, and it helped turn the 57 into a car for absolutely everyone, the chartreuse engine mystery. Here's one so obscure that even die-hard Chevy men argue about it. Early in the 1957 production run, some of the 265 V8 engines came from the factory painted a bright, almost sickly yellow-green. Chartreuse. It wasn't a mistake, the factory did it on purpose to help mechanics instantly tell the older-style 265 apart from the shiny new 2A3, which wore orange. Later in the year, once the changeover settled down, those engines got the orange paint too, and the chartreuse ones vanished. So if you ever pop the hood on an early 57 and find a green engine staring back at you, you're not crazy. You found one of the rarest and weirdest factory quirks of the entire model year. The transmission nobody understood. For 1957, Chevrolet offered a brand new automatic transmission with a fancy name, Turbo Glide. Instead of shifting through gears the way we're used to, it used a clever system that changed ratios smoothly and continuously, so you never felt a shift at all. It even had a special setting for holding the car back on steep hills. On paper, it was the height of modern engineering. In the real world, it was complicated, expensive to fix, and never quite as reliable as the good old 2-speed Power Glide most folks chose instead. Turboglide faded away after just a few years, one of those bold ideas that arrived a little ahead of its time. But for one shining moment in 1957, Chevrolet was offering a no-shift automatic in a family car, and that was something to see. Air conditioning and a cushion of air. Two of the wildest options on the 57 order sheet almost nobody ticked. First, factory air conditioning, a luxury so expensive and so rare that finding an original one today is like striking gold. And second, something called air suspension, which replaced the steel springs with rubber airbags to give a floating, cloud-like ride. It sounded like the future. In practice, it leaked, sagged, and gave owners fits, and it too quietly disappeared. But just picture it. Back in 1957, you could option your Chevrolet with cold air blowing inside and a cushion of air holding you up outside. The space age wasn't just in the styling. For a brave and wealthy few, it was in how the car rode down the road. 68 convertibles. We talked about how rare fuel injection was overall, but here's the number that makes collectors weak in the knees. Of all the 57 Bel Airs built, it's believed only around 68 were fuel-injected convertibles. 68 in the entire country. A drop top in the most desirable color combinations with that exotic fuel-injected 283 underneath is about as rare as American cars get from that era. When one of those crosses an auction block today, serious money changes hands, sometimes approaching $200,000. To think that this started life as a Chevrolet, the everyman's brand, the car for the common family, some of those common cars turned out to be treasures, from $2,200 to a fortune. Speaking of treasure, let's talk about what these cars cost then and now. In 1957, a Bel Air two-door hardtop had a base price right around $2,200. A working man could save up and drive one home. Fast forward to today, and a beautifully restored 57 Bel Air can bring anywhere from $40,000 to well over $100,000, with the rarest fuelies and Nomads climbing far higher than that. A car that a young couple bought new for the price of a modest wedding is now a rolling investment, garaged and polished and shown off with pride. Which one on this list would you bring back tomorrow if you could have it in your driveway again, brand new? We read every single comment, so tell us down below. The colors that defined the 50s. Part of the 57 Chevy's magic was the paint. This was the golden age of the two-tone, and Chevrolet offered a rainbow of them. Matador Red, so bold it practically shouted. Soft India Ivory. Sierra Gold. Inca Silver. Tropical Turquoise. You could pair a bright body color with a contrasting roof for just a few extra dollars, and folks did, in combinations that would look right at home next to a diner and a jukebox. Those colors weren't shy. They were confident and cheerful, the exact opposite of the sensible grays and blacks of the years before. When you picture a 57 Chevy in your mind, chances are it's wearing one of those unforgettable two-tones, because that's the image the whole country fell in love with, an icon alongside Elvis. By now, the 57 Bel Air has become more than a car. It's shorthand for an entire moment in American life. Car experts have called it an icon of its age, right up there with Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and Leave It to Beaver. It's shown up in more movies, television shows, songs, toys, and diner paintings than anyone could count. When a filmmaker or an advertiser wants to say the 1950s in a single image, more often than not they reach for a two-tone 57 Chevy. Very few objects, let alone cars, ever cross over from transportation into pure cultural symbol. This one did. It stopped being just something you drove and became something you felt. The movie car that wasn't. And here's the perfect fact to close on, because it trips up almost everybody. Ask most people about the famous Chevy in the movie American Graffiti, the black one that races at the end, driven by a young Harrison Ford. Nearly everyone assumes it was a 57. It wasn't. It was a 1955 Chevy, its slightly older cousin. The 57 is so overwhelmingly the Chevy in America's memory that people paste its legend onto Tri-5s that aren't even 57s. That, more than any spec sheet or sales chart, tells you how deep this car sank into the national imagination. It became the default. It became the one we all picture, whether it's the right year or not. And honestly, is there any greater proof of a legend than that? Today's topic came from Raymond, one of our subscribers, in the comments last week. If there's something you'd love us to dig into, tell us below. The one with the most likes becomes the next video. So subscribe and you won't miss yours.